interesting pension topics. So today we'll be discussing some pension dashboard updates that have been provided in the last week or so. We're looking at a very interesting Ombudsman case to do with death benefits and sort of a bit around trustees' responsibilities, and also just about the Nest loan that was taken out some time ago, just sort of an update on where they are with that. So David, tell me about there's three kind of key dashboard updates going on at the moment. It's very widely known about dashboards, but what are the updates that's come out in the last week?
Yeah, so three things kind of happened that are relatively important for the dashboard program and the progress of dashboards in the pensions community. God, lots of P's. And I've given us a community rather than industry. Oh, maybe I should say that more often. I always get a bit grumpy when people say the pensions industry. So I don't really know what that means, but maybe the pensions community is a bit nicer. Anyway, that was an aside. So three things. First things from our friends at PASA, they've updated their matching guidance. They did an initial version in 2021, very much at the early days of the dashboard sort of process. But now we're getting real. There's lots of testing happening in the background. People are getting far more clear on what's going to happen. And so what they've done is updated that guidance. And I think one bit of information that's much clearer now as well is what the individuals are going to be putting in to the dashboard. So when they're looking to be found, what data are they going to provide? What data in there is going to be verified? So some data will be verified by the one login that verifies their identity, so the security sort of overlay that happens first. And so they've kind of keyed off that, which seems very clever, to sort of spec out what the matching guidance should look like. And so I'm not going to go into it in great detail here because we haven't got time, and go and read the guidance because it's excellent.
We go on and on, couldn't we, with dashboards?
Yeah, we could. But basically it's kind of saying, you need to look at name, surname, date of birth, and then email. Those things are going to be definitely their core verified information. Mobile number, if that's included, that'll be verified. National insurance number won't be verified. So when you start looking at how you're going to match, the national insurance number might become less important because it's not going to be verified. So it might be that you try to match on some of the other criteria and using national insurance number as one for a bit later on, when you're getting through to your possible matches. And the guidance also goes through what to do when you get possible matches, how to respond, how to correct the data, what you do next, all those kind of things as well. So excellent bit of guidance as usual from PASA. I'm sure it will become the industry best practice. So do look at that if you're a trustee, because it's up to the trustees what the matching criteria is. But this will obviously play into whatever in-house and TPAs do with regards to their matching. I'm going to carry on. Unless you want to come in, Fiona.
No, I was just going to say, the next one that kind of I looked at as well was sort of the private sector with dashboards. So there's lots of information that's come out about that. The government's committed to making sure that everybody has access to the dashboard, including the private sector. So what's your take on everything that's come out?
Oh, that's good. I mean, I think it's something that the government said maybe a year or so ago, said they're going to use the government website first, and then the commercial dashboards would come later. And I think some people started getting a bit concerned that perhaps the commercial dashboards are going to be too far down the line, because the evidence from other countries and what they do with dashboards, we know that the private sector or the commercial dashboard is generally more popular, possibly a bit more investment into sort of user interfaces and these things. I don't want to do government websites down, but sometimes the user interface isn't as important as just getting the information there, which is important. But the private sector ones might be a bit more easier to use, might link into other things people are using for banking or other services or other pensions providers. So a commitment that there will be a private sector dashboard has been reiterated by Torsten Bell. That's good news.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry.
I was just saying it's very important for everybody to have access to it. So.
Yep. And then finally, the final bit of good news is that the state pension is connected. The state pension will obviously be a big part of anyone's retirement income when you eventually get there. And so seeing that on the dashboard with what your state pension will be by the time you get there is really important. So that's good news, and hopefully the user testing goes well and all that maintains a connection. But yeah, three big stories on the matching, on private sector dashboards, and then also that the state pension is connected. So yeah, big news and lots of progress happening.
Lovely. So there's been an interesting case with the Ombudsman that has been published now. Quite a complex case, I would say, but it's just kind of bringing forward, again, trustees' responsibilities and making sure that all beneficiaries are known and taken into account when sort of deciding with death benefit payments and such like. It was extremely interesting, David. I'm going to pass to you to give us the rundown on it before I get confused on all the different people involved.
Yeah, no, I am going to try to avoid getting too far into the various initials and the people involved. But in very high level, there was a member passed away, leaving an unmarried partner, leaving expression of wish, nominating that partner as his dependent partner, and in the will as well, leaving benefits and sort of assets to her. And in addition, he was supporting his mother and also his ex-wife as well. And so this was quite, as you hinted, it was quite a complex family situation. One side of the family weren't very happy that his partner at the time he died was going to benefit so much because of accusations of activity that she'd done around the deceased finances. So the trustees had a really difficult job picking through accusations from one side, a rather complex financial situation from the deceased anyway, and their own rules and their own powers of discretion as well. There was a lot going on. And so the Ombudsman has picked through all this. And I think the high level thing is that even though you have these complex cases and there's people, so the mother was in her 90s, the ex-wife had mental health problems as well. And so these were vulnerable people. And so I think the trustees were cognizant of the fact these people were vulnerable and how they should be contacted, and whether they could be contacted in some way. And the Ombudsman hasn't suggested that the decision itself isn't appropriate. Usually, and this is quite common for the Ombudsman, what they'll try to do is highlight points in the process that perhaps haven't been followed properly. And so what they're suggesting is that the trustees go back again and get some more evidence. The Ombudsman always includes a little summary of how you should include relevant factors, disregard irrelevant factors, and these kind of things in making decisions. And so they basically said that the trustees should go back and find some more information about the mother and the ex-wife to see if they were dependent on the deceased at the time that he passed away. So it's a really, really complex, but it's just a reminder again for trustees listening, just to making sure that you go through that process properly. Again, the decision very often, very rarely is the decision challenged by the Ombudsman. It's always the process and just following that process, documenting your decisions properly. One thing this does also bring into account is this happened in 2015. This person passed away, and some of the death payments weren't paid out until relatively recently. If we can have the IHT rules coming in a couple of years, and then we get a quite defined window when we can do this stuff and pay the tax without penalties arising, these sort of situations make it that virtually impossible. It's very hard to do complex situations in a very short period of time.
Yeah, it's very difficult, especially with death and money and families and strange people. It's very, very difficult to that call. But yeah, as long as you've got the information, that's the main thing. So let's talk about Nest and the rather large loan that they took out back in 2010. Payment schedules and things were all published and announced and things. I think there's been some progress on it and some updates.
Yeah, no, so it's really interesting. So Nest have announced in their accounts that they've made a profit, and they're now actually starting to repay that eye-watering loan, £1.2 billion, that was taken out to set them up. Back in the day, back when auto-enrollment was first being established, obviously Nest was needed in case, so the government's saying you've got to auto-enroll your employees into a pension scheme, and if the private sector said, well, we don't want to run a pension scheme for you because you're not commercially viable, basically Nest was there as the government's backup plan. And so set up with this loan, relatively controversial, I suppose. Some people weren't happy with the state getting into the pensions market in this way, but Nest, surely it must be seen as a force for good, as taking on people that otherwise wouldn't have a pension. They've also done lots of work looking at decumulation, sidecar savings, these kind of things, investing. So Nest does a lot of great work, but it's important to note that they're now starting to repay that loan. Initially, I think they were expected to start repaying in 2026, so a few months early, which is great. Yes. And the plan is that it will be repaid in full by 2038. So again, that's as per the plan. So I think it's good news. I think it's good news that Nest is there, and I think it's good news that it's the loan is getting repaid.
Yeah, definitely. Good news all round.
Cool. But anyway, thank you for joining us. Hope you found those topics interesting, and we'll see you next week on the next episode of Pensions in 10.